Thank you all for joining us for our Network in Action Business Lab. And my name is Sharon Heller, and I run a couple of Network in Action groups here in the Denver area, along with my partner in life and business, Simon. And we offer these monthly business labs to our members. And we've opened up this business lab to other guests as well, especially because we have a virtual format. We have a little bit more room to have more people in our virtual room. Very briefly, Network in Action is a national networking organization, and we're really geared to serve established business owners who are looking for high caliber professional business partnerships and referral partners and strategic collaborative partnerships. So we offer that to our members through monthly meetings. We offer business development such as this business lab and a really tight-knit community of professionals who all work to support each other. So we are looking forward to the presentation today, and I'm going to turn it over to Simon, who's going to introduce our speaker today.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us today and join Martina for our business lab. I think Martina and I met in early February, maybe it was January, and we were talking about the opportunity of maybe doing something like that. And we're talking about leadership and the topic of leadership. And little did we know like how relevant and important that topic would be just about now. And I'm really excited for this presentation, Martina. Thank you for making yourself available in this way. I know for those of you who do not know Martina, she is a leadership executive coach who has a Ph.D. in molecular biology and has spent many years in that industry as a scientist, as a mentor, and then ultimately as a COO of that company, of a biotech company. And I think the topic that we will, or that Martina will talk about, a scientific approach to leadership, is really something that I think as coaches or as business leaders, we always know that leadership is important. We have an understanding of it, but we have like not a lot of like tactical tools or really a way to approach it or understand it. And so I think the methodologies and the tools that Martina is going to share with us is, I think, so applicable for all of us right now. And I'm very much looking forward to your presentation, and thank you again for making time for that. And I think as it relates to questions, if you have any questions, Sharon and I will monitor the chat. So feel free at any point to just put anything into the Zoom chat. And then I know along the way, Martina is also going to take like 1 or 2 breaks after the completion of certain segments to just see if there is any questions or any interaction that we want to engage in at that point. So yeah, I think with that, Martina, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Simon and Sharon, for having me and for the kind introduction. As you said, it's such an important topic, especially during times like these, and I'm really passionate and excited to be presenting today. And just know it's for everyone, because every one of us has a leadership role, right? It could be by default, it could be by choice. Everyone is a leader, and the question really is, how do we show up as leaders? So my intention for today's presentation really is let me back up here. It's probably gonna be quite different from leadership concepts that some of you might heard of before, or thoughts about leadership that we have, because I'm going to show it from a perspective of awareness. So really want to look at leadership from how are our perceptions and awareness, how does that influence our leadership style? And that's really my intention for the call today, to show you how your perception or awareness influence your leadership style and also the results that you're creating in your life. And as Simon said, I'm going to take a few breaks in between. Feel free to either type questions in the chat box or, unmute yourself if you just want to have more of a conversation. So I make this a little bit interactive. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Maybe you can let me know real quick if you can see that well. How does that look to you? Looks good? Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Alrighty. So let's dive right in. I'm gonna be talking about 3 main topics. Let me move you guys up here so I can, perfect, see you. So first of all, I really wanna talk about the importance of self-leadership and how that's connected with our mindset. Then I wanna give you, a tool, a map, our leadership compass. Basically what I'll be doing is I'll introduce 7 different levels of, you can say, leadership perspective or a leadership lens that can serve as a framework for you to really figure out where you are and how much of your potential you're leaving on the table or where you really want to go with your leadership style. And last but not least, I'll share some strategies on how to use that framework and how to use that compass to really step into your ideal leadership style and where you really want to be. All right, let's dive right in here. Okay, so first of all, why is this important? As Simon said, leadership and self-leadership is so important right now because every one of us is a leader. It doesn't matter if we're a CEO or not. We have to show up as leaders during challenging times like these. We have to show up as a leader to our customers, to our clients, to our family, but also most importantly, really to ourselves, right? So for me, or let's just talk a little bit about what self-leadership means. It means knowing who you are and how you show up. It's also having a sense of what you can do. So that comes with confidence and trust in someone's skills, trust in your skills. And then also self-leadership means not just how to positively influence yourself, but also others around you. And so I strongly believe that excellent leadership starts from within. That's why I'm talking about self-leadership. So the question is, how do we really get there, right? What do we need to understand about ourselves in order to be a strong leader? And in my opinion, it all starts with the mindset. And just want to dive really quick into what do we mean when we talk about mindset. So our mindset really represents a way of thinking. It's kind of our belief systems, it shapes how we see the world, how we experience things around us, how we deal with challenges, how we deal with opportunities. And those belief systems we usually acquire early on in our lives so that, we're very influenced by our parents, upbringing, family, education, and just in society in general, really. And as you can imagine, some of those belief systems, they might be really helpful for us in order to achieve certain goals, but other belief systems might really be standing in the way of what we want to achieve. But once we create the awareness, and again, I'll be talking a lot about awareness today. Once we create awareness around those belief systems, we can really choose which of those serve us well, which of those we want to keep, and which of those we want to get rid of. And before we dive deeper, before I explain more about those 7 different levels, I really would like for you to think of awareness as a lens. So when we look at the lens that has a very small aperture, it's almost like having tunnel vision, right? We just see a very focused aspect, a very small part of the whole. There's also not a lot of light coming through that lens. And the more, we expand our field of view, or the bigger the lens gets, we get to see other things. We might not only see the challenge, that we saw initially. We might start seeing solutions. We might start seeing opportunities. So I just like to use that analogy when we talk about awareness, because it's really the same thing, right? Either we're just so laser focused and have tunnel vision, or we are starting to see the whole picture. Alrighty. So let's talk about a leadership compass, or let's go more into those concepts. So the model that I'll be presenting, this is actually based on Bruce D. Schneider's work. He is a Ph.D. psychologist, I believe. He's done over, I don't know if it's 25 or 30 years of research in the areas of human potential and consciousness. And he's developed this system or this chart that really helps people understand where they are in terms of their awareness, their leadership capability, and also how much of their potential they leave on the table. So for me, I want you to learn about those 7 levels and you know, don't worry about remembering all of this. I will take a break, do a little bit of recap. I know it's going to be a lot of information, but my goal really is to provide some insight and open your lens through which you see leadership, or through which you see, you know, the world in general, or challenges. In other words, raise your leadership ability by raising your level of awareness. Any questions so far? Everybody good? Okay, I see a few nods here. Good, good. So, and you can see my screen well, right? Because I have you guys on top here, but you can see all the slides. Okay, very good. So this is what I call a self-perception chart or self-awareness chart. And don't worry, I'm not going to go into all of the details here. There's a lot of information on it. If anybody wants that as a reference, I'm more than happy, you know, to send that along through email. What I really want you to take away from this is, or just a brief explanation, every level represents a certain lens or perspective of leadership, or through which we see the world. I mean, it can be really expanded to everything. I want you to just, you know, listen, see what resonates with you. What sounds familiar to you? You know, what levels do you experience when we talk about this? And just know that every level typically is associated with certain thought patterns, certain emotions, and then certain actions that we're taking, and that creates the results in our lives. So, all right, let's get started here. So the first level, or the first category, the first circle here, it's what I call the small self. We also talk about a catabolic perspective. So what does catabolic mean? It really means when we view the world through those filters, we experience a lot of stress. There's a lot of resistance. Things are hard. We usually work very hard in those levels. And I'm bringing this up because when we operate from those 2 levels, we usually leave up to 70 up to 90% of our potential on the table. So we don't tap into our skills that are available to us. And so to give you an example, what does it look like to operate from a level like that? Let's say folks experiencing a lot of level 1 energy or perspective, they might feel like they're a victim to the external circumstances. They feel like stuck. They don't really know how to move forward. It can even lead to feeling deflated or disengaged with family, with business partners, because they just don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. And sometimes those folks feel like they want to throw in the towel. Other perspective would be more from a level 2 perspective, where people feel really angry and frustrated. And that's usually when we start to hustle, when we start to work really hard in order to overcome certain barriers or certain obstacles. And it's really interesting because most corporations work from a level 2 perspective. And this is also why a lot of people say, well, I really work well under stress. And while this is true that you can get a lot done under stress, it's not sustainable. success always comes at the price, at the cost. Usually that looks something like either people don't feel fulfilled at all, although they have all those, quote unquote accomplishments on the paper, very successful to the outside, but inside they feel hollow. Or people burn out. I usually see a combination of both of those. So, and most people who are really stressed, they see the world through those two lenses. And again, it's absolutely normal. And I'm sure, and I'm, would be happy to hear from you guys also. I'm sure every one of us has experienced some of that, some of those thoughts or emotions that I described with the current challenge that's been going on. And it's almost like a grief process that we have to go through. But the key here really is to gain awareness when you're operating from that perspective. Because as I said, we leave up to 90% of our power. We give it away. We give up to 90% of our power away there. And I really like the following saying. I think it describes really well why we want to move out to that. It's a quote that says, "You don't drown by falling into the river, but you drown by staying submerged in it." And this, I feel like, really describes those two levels well. Everyone will experience challenges, but if you stay there and don't have the tools or the trust in yourself to move out of that, then it's going to be, really difficult. All right, let's move on. So that was what we call the catabolic category. The next levels, so anything up from 3 to 7, is what we refer to anabolic range. So that means, things start to flow more, things are easier, there's less stress, we're not constantly operating from a fight or flight response. It's where we start taking constructive action. So as you can see, there's more movement. We're not as stuck as in level 1. And so I want to start with level 3 because it's really an interesting one. I refer to it more as the buffer zone, because although it's the first anabolic level and it's the first level where we start taking responsibility, where we start coping, there's a little bit of movement. It's also really easy to get stuck on that level. So why is that? For a few reasons. So think about a closet, right? Think about, you want to clean up your house, you put everything into a closet, you close the doors, the house looks clean and tidy. But as soon as you need something from the closet, open the door, everything starts spilling out because things have not been put in order or addressed, or however you want to call it, right? And that's why it's easy to get stuck in that level, because you really need to address, the underlying thoughts from level 1 and 2 in order to really go into the higher levels, go past level 3. Another interesting aspect of level 3 is that we start rationalizing a lot. So I see a lot of, when I work with my clients on certain fears, fear of change or fear of success, whatever that might look like, this often comes up in level 3 because often when we try to change things, we're afraid of taking action because we're afraid that maybe things are not as good as we want them to be when we take action. We're comfortable in level 3. We know exactly how things go. It's, a great example would be people want to leave their corporate job because they don't really like it. But at the same time, they're so afraid of starting their own business because they're not really sure if it's going to be better or not. So they will start rationalizing, say, you know what, actually, I'm fine. Things are good. And that things are good enough. So that's like a typical level 3 response. So you can see that it's really hard, or not, it's hard to move on. It's easy to get stuck there. And when I talk about fears, I could talk about this forever, but for me, the quickest way to achieve growth is to do things scared every single day. Because when we wait until we feel less scared, then we do things without stretching ourselves, right? We do things out of mediocrity. And if you're not scared, then you're settling. And this is kind of level 3. That's the settling level. And don't mistake that by people being really content. You know, that would be more level 5, where you say, well, I don't need more. You know, I'm happy where they are. But they're truly happy. At level 3, it's kind of a band-aid, putting on a band-aid and saying I'm fine because I'm too afraid to explore what else is out there. So one important thing I want to bring up here, and as you've probably already realized, there's an advantage and a disadvantage to each of those levels. So level 3, an advantage to go there is really when we feel, you know, we are a victim to certain circumstances and we're feeling hopeless. We can't really take any action. Then it's good to move to a level 3, and that could look anything like, you know, with the current situation where people want to throw in the towel, moving to level 3 would be, okay, things will be fine. You know, we'll get through this. That would be a level 3 thinking. We'll be okay. Let's just take one step at a time. And so that's kind of how you get yourself out of a level 1 perspective. Alrighty. Any questions so far? Or do you want me to go through all of those before we? Do you see? Yeah, Simon.
I have a question. So when you say, how do you move from one level to the next? Is it just through wanting yourself to be there, or how do you get from a place of being deflated to accepting responsibility?
That's a great question. I'll cover a little bit, or a lot of that actually, in the strategies later on. But overall, it's really about expanding your awareness. And maybe it makes more sense when I talk about the strategies later. Because
okay.
As you said, it's not rationalizing. You know, it's not just, okay, I'll change my thoughts. I'll put on a happy face. I fake it until I make it. It's not about that at all. Once you train that awareness muscle, it's easier for you to really look at other opportunities. Or saying, you know, let's say you're at the level 1 and feel like there are no solutions, then can you even say, how true is that really? You know, what would be another perspective to look at that? So these are some ways to do that, but I'll introduce 3 strategies that help build that awareness muscle, and that ultimately will shift you out of that. Does that make sense, or answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, perfect. Good. Yeah.
Good. All right, so let's talk about the next 3 levels. So 4, 5, and 6, and these are kind of my favorite levels. I like to refer to those levels as our zone of genius, or our peak performance levels, you know, when things really start flowing, we're very productive. And our zone of genius can really look different for each of us, right? There are some folks that love to be of service, they love to help others, they love to build those deep relationships with their clients. So those are the people that operate more from a level 4 perspective. They're very compassionate. Level 4 is a heart level. It's more heart-centered. Then some of the greatest leaders of all walks of life really operate from a level 5 perspective. What that looks like is they're very peaceful, content, powerful. And the reason why is because they don't really see anything as a failure, or let me rephrase that. They see each situation as an ability to learn, right? So they gain information from each situation, from each challenge that they experience, and learn from that, and can use that to, you know, make the decision and move forward. And also from a level 5 perspective is they can really see other people as gifted. So there is, you know, the higher you get in those levels, the judgment decreases. So you can really see skills and gifts in others. That's why this is also often referred to as the win-win perspective, or the win-win level, where this could look like in a business, you know, you form power partnerships because you can really see what someone else brings to the table. There's no more comparing or competition, if you will. It's more, more about synergy. How can we work together? So that's level 5 perspective. Level 5 is very rational, so it's a lot in your head. Level 6 is where we really tap into our intuition more. So a lot of really creative ideas, big innovations are created from people that have a lot of that level 6 energy, because they see the world from a lens, or they have the ability to apply holographic thinking. So what that is you can really see things from logic, from emotion, and also intuition, combining all those three. Whereas, the lower levels, 4 is mostly heart or emotion, 5 is mostly rational. At level 6, you can combine those things and really tap into your intuition. And also there is very little judgment at level 6 of yourself or judging others. And just generally, a feeling of openness, a feeling of synergy, and really tapping into your intuition and using opportunities that are presented along the way. So I want to talk just briefly about level 7. No one really resides on that level. I call it the Zen level, maybe, Buddhist monk meditating on a mountaintop. It's just, what I like about this level is you have such expanded awareness. Your field is so big that you can choose which of the lower levels you really want to tap into. Because sometimes, it might require, a certain situation might require that you build deep relationships with others. So you know exactly what that looks like from a level 4 perspective. Other situations might require to really keep a cool head and focus on a very rational or logical approach. So you can tap into level 5. So just knowing all that gives you a good framework, but not just a framework for yourself. The more people learn about the different levels, they can also see how other people are operating. Like, okay, that person is really angry, is really operating from a level 2 perspective and might not even see, other solutions. So why this is helpful is it's because you don't take things as personally anymore once you have that awareness. Again, because you can see, another perspective, or say, okay, that person's operating from that level, or level 2 is really angry. I wonder why. What's going on. What else is happening in their life right now, so they feel that way. So it just really helps to stay detached, or don't detach in a positive way, meaning not taking things personally. What else did I want to share here? So just know that we don't reside just at one level. So as we respond to different situations throughout the day, our awareness fluctuates between all those levels. However, an individual usually has like a primary and a secondary level where they usually operate from when things go well. And then also usually that goes down to lower levels when they're very stressed. All right, so I talked a lot about, those levels, and don't worry about remembering each level. I think what I really want you guys to take away from this is there's 2 categories, right? The anabolic categories, where we work extremely hard to make things happen. We leave a lot of our potential on the table. We give a lot of our power away. And then there's the anabolic range, that's where we are more in the flow, where things are much easier. There's less stress. We're more present. And just knowing, okay, these are the 2 levels, and that for me or for my clients, often when they know they give 90% of their power away when they're operating from a level 1 perspective, that's really a big motivation to try to, move up to higher levels. And then another aspect, and I think I alluded to that a little bit, is when when the lens opens or you gain more awareness, the challenges, they don't go away, right? They're still there. Like, it's not, like I said earlier, you put on those colored glasses or you think it until you make it. It's just seeing everything. good and the bad. And once you gain more awareness, there's also less judgment. So there, there might not be a good or a bad situation. It just is. And we have a conscious choice to deal with those situations in a certain way. All right. I'm going to take a little break here and see what questions come up for you guys. And
so you can either unmute yourself and just ask, or if you want to type a question into the chat. I'll ask a question, Martina, while we're seeing if anybody else has one. You mentioned that most people have like a primary and a secondary kind of level that they function at. Would you say, like, even as somebody kind of progresses and gains more awareness and is maybe able to kind of reside at a higher level, is the default still like that, like primary and secondary level that people will revert back to when they're stressed?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there are two things to that. So your primary and secondary level, they can actually change. Like you said, the more awareness you gain, you might approach things. Let's say you start out with your primary being a level 4 and secondary a level 3. That's kind of your typical way of approaching certain, let's say problems. However, the more you train yourself or that awareness muscle, you can really shift up to higher levels, and then these become your new normal or your new primary and secondary level. Then, so that's when things go, on a normal day. Usually when people react under stress, they go down to level 1 and 2. So there's two things. Yes, that can change too, but in terms of you can shift to other levels, but what I see mostly is that the time that people spend in that level is reduced. So they're, able to snap out of it much quicker. And then usually, and I'll explain, it makes a little bit more sense later, usually they also have a tertiary level in the stress response, and that's what they shift towards when they get out of the stress response. And that is usually, let's say, that's usually your primary level when everything goes well. I don't know if that makes sense. I'll explain more later, but it's more, yes, you can shift your primary and secondary response. For your stress reactions, it's mostly timing, how to shift out of that. It definitely a percentage will decrease, but I've seen most folks are still in a 1 and 2, but just not as long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. And then we had a couple questions come in from Natalie, which
yes.
I will read to you. Natalie asked, what percentage of leaders function in an anabolic range?
Mm-hmm.
And then part 2 is, what is the biggest reason leaders in the US are not anabolic leaders?
Great question. I don't know how many leaders operate. I need to do some research because there are really interesting case studies out there that actually measure, measured the response or the percentage of where certain leaders are in. I know that the majority is operating from a level 2. It's just because you get a lot of results, through force, as I said. I think that, can be a political discussion, but that's why there's also a lot of turnover, because people just burn out, but they can be replaced. I don't know if that answers your question, but the majority of leaders or corporations operate more from a level 2 perspective. Why that is, I can only speculate around that, because I think it has been proven effective, to some extent, at least for some corporations, when they feel like employees are, somewhat replaceable. I think it's also a lot of mindset that we feel like we have to to work hard, or we have to hustle extra hard in order to get somewhere. I think that's, you know, a belief system that maybe it was true for our parents' generation or the generation before that. But I feel like things shift a lot. I also see that people feel like they have to put on a mask or be that powerful leader in order to be respected. You know, you can see that sometimes with a lot of women that work in a male-dominated field or are now in their, you know, 50s, 60s. They really had to use their elbows in order to get where they are. And it's just kind of reinforcing a same concept, right? That you have to show up that way. Or, you know, I think for a lot of male leaders, and again, you know, don't want to generalize something, but if they were really compassionate or very heartfelt, you know, maybe they think they would be perceived as weak if they're not the strong leader and forceful leader. So I think there's a lot of reasons why this could be, but I also see a lot shifting, because it's hard to get buy-in from your team or from folks if you constantly put a lot of pressure on them. If you work from a level 2 perspective, it's easier to get a buy-in from a level 4 perspective when you know, build those relationships, when you truly care about others.
Right.
And also there's everything has to do with a lot of ego too. And the higher you go, the less ego you have, or, you know, you can transcend that ego, if you will.
Good. Thank you, Martina. And Jesse had his hand up. Jesse, you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you think culture also might play a big role in kind of how people show up? I went to a school we had a lot of classmates where everyone was kind of from a different country. And so obviously there was different leadership styles and different engagement and obviously communication styles. So do you think even the culture and upbringing would affect like which level you come in?
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, you know, culture or society forms certain belief systems. And if we've, you know, been successful or with what we've done, then this is reinforced again. Even if, I mean, we can talk about what success really means, right? What is successful? Is it making a lot of money and burning out? Or yeah, that could be a whole other discussion. But Jesse, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree that it's a cultural thing, because I feel like, and again, I'm not an expert at all, and Jesse, you can talk to that probably way better than I do. In Eastern cultures, they might have a very different approach to leadership, just assuming.
And Martina, one other question. Is your theory of leadership tied to leaders being able to recognize where others reside and lead them out of lower levels to achieve higher levels? Mm-hmm. And part 2 is in how do they do that?
Mm-hmm. Very good question. Yes, absolutely. Because that's, again, one of the strongest leaders really operate from that level 5 perspective, because they can really see the gifts and skills in others. And it's not just trying to iron out someone's weaknesses, but those leaders would really strengthen, you know, the skills and the strengths of someone and bring that out. Or they're able to really, you know, coach others around opening their perspective and their awareness, instead of telling them, well, you have to do things exactly that way. They can really help them raise their awareness. Does that answer the question? Can you repeat the second part? I had some thoughts on that too, on how they do that, I think.
Yeah, and how do they do that was the second part. Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is through modeling, you know, how you show up as a leader. Because if people see that you create, you know, buy-in, you create results, success, with a leadership style that's different from just being forceful, that will reinforce that other people want to adapt a similar style. And also it's a lot about, I feel like a lot about trust and building people's confidence, because the higher you go on the chart, the more confidence someone exudes. And if you can instill confidence in others, I think this is a great way to lead and help them realize, there's a different way of going about leadership.
Great, thank you. I think you could move on, Martina. Yeah.
Sure. Alrighty. So, there's one more thought or one more thing I wanted to say. So in order for us to really understand where we are on the chart, most of us would tend to use our thoughts. Remember, there were like, each level has certain thoughts, certain emotions, and certain actions associated with it. And for us, in order to identify where we are, we might think, oh, what are the thoughts that I'm using right now, in order to identify what level am I in. But our mind is quite complex. I mean, 90% of our thoughts are unconscious, so they come and go without us really realizing it. So why I'm saying this is an easier way to figure out where you are on the chart is kind of, really going inward, tapping into your emotion. How are you feeling? Do you feel like you have a lot of weight on your shoulder, a lot of weight on your chest, or your jaw's clenched? Are you very tense? Is your neck, your shoulders, or the shoulders up at your ears? That's a much quicker way and also more accurate way of kind of defining where you are. All right, so we talked a little bit about why leadership is important, self-leadership, how this is all related to mindset and awareness. I gave you a little bit of an overview of a compass or chart to figure out where you are. Maybe you've even identified some levels that sound familiar to you, or levels where you feel like, oh, I really want to move there or have more of that in my day-to-day actions. Now I want to go a little bit into strategies that can help you, start implement some of the things. So I'll talk about 3 strategies: AAA, tracking, and intention. And those strategies really, it's kind of the basics, it's a starting point. Those strategies are there for you to help you move out of the more catabolic levels, level 1 and 2, to a more productive and easier, anabolic range or category, as I call it. All right, let's start here. AAA, well, everybody knows AAA, super nice car towing service, but it can really help you also pull yourself out of, the negative emotions. It's really simple. The first A stands for awareness. It's really recognizing, how do you feel? It's about, I'm feeling really frustrated, I'm angry. And the second A is acceptance. And that's an important one. Just telling yourself, okay, it's okay that I feel that way. It is what it is, instead of judging ourselves, because that just makes everything worse if we are hard on ourselves because we feel a certain way. So acceptance, it is what it is. And this third A is action. And with that, I mean, you don't have to solve the whole problem at once, right? It's more about, let's get moving. Let's put one little step. Let's take one little step and put that into action. What's the first step I can do? And usually what that does is, as I said, it gets you going, it gets you moving. You might, have new situations come up or new choices to take. Does that make sense at all? Yeah, okay. So the second one is tracking. So what I mean with that is, again, it's all about strengthening your awareness muscle. You see that there's overlap between all those 3 strategies. Check in with yourself throughout the day. How are you feeling? Where do you feel you are on the chart right now? be curious what level of awareness you're currently experiencing, and especially if you are in the lower levels, in order to shift, you have to be aware of it. And then you can even ask yourself, what would it look like if I were to operate from a level 4 or 5 perspective? And listen, I know this is not easy. It's all easier said than done, especially when we feel, those heavy negative emotions. It's very hard to just snap out of it. But again, awareness is the first step. And then I also feel like it allows us to take a break. And a way, what I found really helpful to shift out of that is get moving, take a break, go outside, go for a walk, go run, or whatever that is, get the blood moving, because that little bit of exercise really helps us to reduce the stress hormones in our body. It also induces some, endorphins, hormones that make us feel good, that evoke positive feelings. And once we are in a state where we feel a little bit better emotionally, then it's easier to, look at things from a different perspective. So there's different ways of tracking. It's about strengthening that awareness muscle. There are apps out there, mood tracking apps. I haven't extensively studied any of these, but the one that stood out to me was called Moody. It's really simple. You don't have to, create an account or sign up with your email. The way, or the reason why this might be helpful is you can start seeing patterns, right? Is it a certain time of the day or a certain incident that always triggers a stress response? It's just really gaining more awareness, because that will help you prepare for future events that are similarly stressful. And then you can approach things from a slightly different perspective. All right, last one here. It's really my favorite one. It's checking in, what's the energy behind the intention, because we're so action oriented that often we don't check our intention behind a certain action. But the intention is really what creates the trajectory of our results. So let's say the intention is fear-based, right? Then the likelihood of achieving successful results is really diminished. But if our intention is based on the higher levels of awareness, it's based on possibility, excitement, opportunity, then we will create true success. Just to give you an example, let's say you run a business and you're thinking about launching a new service or a new product. Really ask yourself, what's my intention behind it? Is it because of fear? I'm afraid if I don't offer this, I can't keep up with the competition? Or is it really that you're giddy about, offering that you're super excited because you know what impact it's going to have, or all the opportunities or possibilities that can range from that? So it's really good to kind of check in with yourself and see where you're coming from. And I think I mentioned that earlier, because when you're at the higher levels of awareness, you're not comparing yourself as much anymore to others. So it's really about, what can I do? How can I be of impact, of service to others? And this is really when the fear kind of takes the back seat. All right, let's see here. Any questions so far?
None are in the chat. Feel free again, if anybody wants to unmute yourself and just ask your question or raise your hand, you can do that.
And while you wait, I'm just going to give a quick recap again. So we talked about self-leadership and awareness, talked about the self-perception chart as a compass, and then a few tools, the AAA, tracking and intention, to really figure out or train your awareness muscle and help you pull yourself out of those lower levels.
No questions, Martina, that I see.
Good. So, there's a few more. Okay, if you're interested in diving deeper, there's actually an assessment that measures exactly your percentage of leadership potential in each of those levels. And like I said earlier, it's gonna measure it, when things go well for you on a day-to-day basis. So what's your primary, what's your secondary level of energy that or perception that you usually use, and how do you react under stress? So there's a number of benefits to that. I'm not going to go into all of those points here, but what stands really out for me and my clients is that to gain awareness of how your emotions drive your life, I think that's a really big one. But also knowing how your habits, how your typical reactions under stress show up for you, and what can you do to really eliminate that stress before it becomes a bigger problem. And the most powerful one that I see is really understanding how your perception might be influencing not just your leadership style, but how you show up, might be influencing what results are you creating in your life. So if anyone's interested, just email me. You can do that as an individual assessment. There's a 360 component to it. It can be done as a team, which is really powerful because you not only get individual readings, but then also you get the graphs for the entire team. What levels does the team operate from? And that usually opens up very interesting and productive conversations. If you want to get in touch, please connect on LinkedIn. I usually share a lot of content there. I've got a website and email address. You don't need to jot that down now. I'm more than happy, to send that out. So I could talk about this forever, but there's probably three more things for you to take away. The first one is really, it's all about practicing, right? It's similar to meditation. It sounds easy. Well, just watch your breath, or, in terms of awareness, just watch your thoughts. Where are you at the chart? What can you do to shift? It sounds super simple, but I mean, everyone who has tried meditation knows it's not that simple. I'm just saying this because I want to really encourage you to keep trying, even if it's hard at first, but it's a practice, like a yoga practice. You'll always learn something new. And it's just so amazing how much easier things get once you expand your awareness. And the second one, and this is really dear to my heart, is knowing it's not about an end goal. It's not about reaching a certain destination. It's not about just reaching, level 6 or 7 and then staying there. It's not about that at all. It's really about enjoying the journey and creating that awareness. It's not about the intention, I want to be an inspiring leader. That's kind of a side product. Being in those anabolic levels just makes you feel better, and things just go much easier, much smoother. We make it easier on our lives. And as a result, we just appear more confident, calmer, more peaceful, and also being more present, because we're not constantly worrying about the future or ruminating about the past. We're really in the present. And it's most people, and again, I think that's, just our culture, that we're always striving for the best, for the next best thing. And once we've achieved that, we're still not fulfilled. Something is still missing. So we're upping our goal, and let's do this, let's go there. And again, it's, I just see that it often leads to, the once or if then scenarios. Once I get that title, then I'll take better care of myself. Or then I go on a vacation. Once I make this amount of money, then I do something nice for myself. But it's really about enjoying the present moment. And I don't know. For me, being an inspiring leader is a side product of that all. So you will automatically just inspire others just by the way you show up. And I like to give like an example when people do sports in order, is that a good example? What some people go running because they want to stay fit, right? But other people run because they truly enjoy it. Or for me, it's rock climbing. I love to rock climb, but not because then I can say, oh, I climbed that certain grade, or I climbed that mountain, or I, did that difficult climb. It's more, I really enjoy it. It's fun. It makes me feel better. It makes me show up as a better person. And I think the same really goes true with raising your awareness. And being a great leader is all a side product of that. All right. I want to leave you guys with one quote here that I think really sums that up nicely. So self-leadership is about awareness and tolerance and not letting your own natural tendencies limit your potential. All right. With that, I want to say thank you to you guys, and I'm happy to take any questions. I want to hear your thoughts. How is this different from what you've heard about leadership before? What resonated with you? What didn't make sense at all? Yeah, love to hear.
So I encourage you guys to come off of mute and actually speak during this part so that we can hear from each other a little bit. Who's got questions, thoughts, maybe something you noticed or learned, some new perspective from today?
Hi, this is Angela. I think I love this last quote, Martina, because as I was listening to the whole presentation in my mind, is this similar to one of the questions someone presented, whether it's cultural and kind of how much of externalities or your situation is affecting how your leadership level, right? So is it some of them is inertly who you are, and then or it shifts, depends on kind of the external kind of situation, which kind of lead to the importance of choosing environment that fits to your kind of true levels of inertia, I guess, to really help you be the leader potentials that you have. So I guess, so it's very interesting just to balance between your ability to shift and then look at situations to present at different level, depends on the situation. I think that's a skill definitely that you kind of show us how to strengthen our muscles. But also the thing is also finding the right situation or the right environment for us to be able to grow.
Yeah, I like that, Angela. So I'm hearing two things. One is really the internal aspect, right? How do you deal with certain external situations? It can be, or even cultural situations that are, either more in alignment or less in alignment with who we really are, or our authentic self, or a culture in which we want to thrive. And then there's also all the external circumstances. How do they affect our leadership ability? And that could be a whole other presentation when we talk about, today we only talked about internal factors, but they help you, to deal better with whatever is going on externally. But what I hear you say, and correct me if I misunderstood, but what I heard is, it might be much easier to really truly step into your potential when the external circumstances are more aligned with who you are or your values, your cultural perspective. Did I get that right, Angela?
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty complex. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
I have a question. Is your approach to coaching leadership and what you presented here more biologically based, given your background, or, but you do talk about intention and other things, or is it and you also bring in a little bit of like neuroscience too, or do you think that it blends in a lot with what's going, kind of a hot topic now, is blending Eastern Western philosophy and medicine to do integrated leadership training, which is taking a lot of Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy and put it together. But the reason I ask it is because the way that you presented it, which I thought was extremely nice, it was very well laid out. The person who came up with it, did that person come up with it from a certain viewpoint that's different than that?
I love your
I didn't really word that very well, but
no, I know exactly where you're coming from. So to answer the first part is, yes, I'm a scientist by training. I'll always have a rational approach to certain things, but I feel like I have this unique combination and also interest where, okay, I want to have a rational strategy, but then I really want to tap into, more of an intuition, more of things that go a little bit beyond our rational mind that we may not be able to grasp, because you have to have a certain trust, and trust is not, trust in your skills, confidence, and trust is not something that we can explain very much on a rational level. Mm-hmm. To answer your second question, and I don't know if anyone has realized, but the different levels, just how they're colored in, it looks very similar to the chakras in our, from an more Eastern perspective. And the founder actually talks about energy, because he says everything, Bruce D. Schneider explains these levels from different levels of energy, because he says everything is energy, and how we show up, that will also attract people that have a similar energy or mindset. I didn't use the term. Sometimes people don't really know what to do with it. Other people really resonate well with it. But yeah, he goes much into that perspective of everything is energy, and how we show up. Yeah, I'm not doing a good job explaining that, but that's
it makes sense. Yeah.
That's his approach, and it's super interesting. This topic, yeah, because it really combines that, and I feel like when I first started out, there's still that scientist in me that needs to explain everything. Yeah. But sometimes letting go of that and really just listening to your gut, listening to your intuition. Mm-hmm. I think it's so overlooked, but has such tremendous potential. And if you can balance those two, and I think that's really what's happening on a level 6, where you have that holographic thinking, you have the rational aspect, you can look at it from an emotional aspect, you also check in with your gut feeling. It's no wonder that's that this level is very high, because you access so many different ways of looking at challenges or whatever that is.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Just kind of reinforce the awareness part. I actually have taken the ELI assessment, and how it kind of, especially under stress, and it definitely shows you, what levels you kind of operate in. Being able to reflect on that and ask yourself the questions of like, why, where does this energy come from? What situations kind of facilitate that energy. It's been really cool to be able to kind of dissect yourself, and slowly with the awareness, you're able to move through different levels as you become obviously aware, and then being able to see what influences in your life, create those levels. So I think I took about 3 weeks ago, and so now I'm able to see that I operate much better under stress, in a way that I want to operate, because kind of how Martina said, each level isn't necessarily good or bad, because they do have usefulness in different situations. And so once you're aware of where you operate, you're kind of able to choose what kind of energy is most useful at the time. So I've really appreciated the assessment and I really appreciated this, because going deeper into these levels is always helpful to kind of become more and more.
Yeah, maybe even different language, different perspective again. I know when you and I talk, I think filters really resonated with you, that you see the world through different filters when you're at different levels. And also, I don't know if I mentioned this, I think I did. It's not a personality assessment, right? It doesn't put you in a certain category. It's an attitudinal assessment. And as I said, the results can really change. And I think I mentioned that case study. It's really interesting to see, because there's also the assessment will give you like an average number of, where you are. It's all those levels combined, under optimal and under stress. And then people have retaken the assessment after working, on their awareness for a while, and they've seen a huge shift, or a significant shift in their average level. But most importantly, they've seen a huge shift in their life and in their, and the results that they're getting in their lives. And we're actually doing a case study with some young women in Nepal, with Jessie, where we're going to take this assessment and then retest them again in a year. So I'm super excited about that, because it is powerful. Any other questions?
I have a question, Martina, that you talked about fear, and that really struck me. And you've said something like, if you're not scared, you're settling. I don't know, I might not have gotten it quite right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to hear just any strategies that you share with your clients about how to kind of learn how to tolerate the fear, because I believe what you're saying is true, and I've experienced that, but I know there's like a certain threshold I have, with like tolerating living in that, feeling.
No, this is a great question. So there's two things to it. Where do I start? Once, you can look at fear kind of as an indicator, that you're about to stretch yourself and there's growth happening if you step into that. So that is one thing that might give you some motivation. The second thing is how to shift out of it is really asking yourself the questions: what's the worst possible scenario that can happen? If I were to do this, what's the worst possible scenario? I mean, doomsday scenario, right? Don't hold back there. Just what's the worst? And then also, what is the absolutely best that can happen? And then figuring out what would be more painful, not experiencing the best or the opportunity that's in there, or the worst case scenario. So kind of a pain gain analysis. And again, it's very rational, right? It's really thinking about, okay, trying to think of an example, but usually the worst case scenario doesn't happen. Or even when we think about the worst case scenario, it's often about, well, what will other people think of me? How will I be perceived? And then really asking yourself, if you think, well, people might judge you, how true is that really? Maybe even asking more questions to really figure out, is that really true? But I think that the biggest part of that equation is, what would be more painful for you to miss out on certain opportunities? And how happy also would you be if you just settle, or even ask yourself, if, when I'm 80 or 90 years old and look back at my life, what would I be doing in that situation? So these are just a few thoughts on.
That is so helpful. That's really helpful, because I think I'm good at playing out worst case scenarios, but don't fully play out the best case scenario or ask that question.
And that's totally normal. I mean, everybody does that, right? We always focus more on the negative than the positive, because it has a lot to do with fear. And we often don't really step into the positive scenario because we try to downplay and say, well, I'm not even sure if I can do that, but it doesn't matter. I mean, the worst case scenario is, how likely is that to happen, and why do you think if you put your mind to something, it's not going to work out?
Great. Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions. Go ahead, Walt.
What I liked about the presentation, Martina, is a lot of leadership strategies or books that you might read about it, I think are very outwardly tactical.
Yeah.
And sometimes the result is a forced leadership style that it's not effective.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a little more inwardly tactical, and ultimately, the ability to kind of enjoy the moment, be in the moment, and let your leadership style just come out as a side product, as you said, is something that I think will be more effective for a lot of people.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Walt. And I also think it allows us to be more our true and authentic selves, so we don't have to, put on a mask when we go into the office or whatever that might look like, right? We can be our true self, and showing up that way, I feel like, well, it's more comfortable, one, and putting on a mask takes out a lot of energy on us. So with that leadership style, I feel like you just have more energy at the end of the day. You're not as drained because you can be your true self, and also you're not as much in the catabolic range. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, Martina, it's Mike. Hey, I was going to pick up on Sharon's point, which I thought was a good one about, facing your fear and all that, but don't fear and confidence kind of go hand in hand in this model?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're asking whether, if you had more confidence, and it would be easier to overcome fears?
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. And, the higher you are on that chart, the more confidence you also have. But I also feel like if you were to stretch yourself and, do something that makes you grow, you will gain more confidence. So it kind of feeds itself. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Martina, I have a question or just an observation, which is, I think we're all in a position where we have to show up as leaders, coming out of this crisis, and there's big reflection that we need to do. There's big decisions we need to make as professionals, as business owners, and I'm just realizing like how many hats we're wearing every day in our business as professionals and so forth. And sometimes we're just like on autopilot executing on that. But this tool is really something that one can apply to whether I'm talking to a client, whether I'm talking to a prospect, whether I'm doing my preparation work, or just like to everything that we're actually doing. But it takes even that awareness to stop and even with every, like the most minute thing that we're doing, apply this and really see where I'm operating from. I guess I'm just seeing much more opportunity to apply this than what the traditional concept of leadership, where you think, okay, there's 2 or 3 areas in my life that applies to leadership, but it really applies to everything.
It does. No, I like that observation, because the way we do one thing, that's kind of how we do everything. And again, if we try to show up as a different persona, in our job, or a different persona when we deal with family members. It's just, I don't know, I can see a lot of friction there, because again, you're not your true self sometimes, or you feel like you can't be your true self because you have to be a strong leader. But I think you can be a strong leader at the high level of awareness, and then this is how you do everything. This is how you interact with your clients, with your partners, with your family members, with your kids. And it's really, there are no boundaries. Yeah.
Martina, I'm a therapist, and I get quite a few people at different stages in their careers who express the desire to, move up into leadership roles or even higher leadership roles. And I fully intend on using this. But there's a lot of people, I would say, more than half, that come to therapy with absolutely no self-awareness. So for the ones that are not real good about learning what self-awareness is, they're very complacent, being blissfully ignorant. What advice would you give me to, even if they took, like the ELI or something, and it just shows they need improvement across everything. I don't want to just like run the bus over them and tell them they suck, but to tell them, you have a long way to go. I mean, what do you do with your clients who come in and they've got the motivation, but maybe they just don't have basic skills, social skills, that kind of thing, where they're at a 1 or a 2 and they want to be up by a 7 in 3 months. And you're like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, this is a great question. It's a tricky one, because let's say you go through the ELI with folks that are not very aware. I had this with one client of mine who was very much in level 1 or 2 response. And that's also how she saw the assessment results. It's like, yeah, I can't change anything. I'm the victim. Everything is happening to me. I'm always getting fired because it's always a toxic work environment, and it's never, me. So it's a tricky one, because I think it really requires building a lot of trust and gently asking questions that might open them up more, that might, really figuring out what's really going on here. And I mean, you as a therapist, you probably, know that there's a lot of the conditioning that everybody receives through their childhood has a lot of impact on the belief systems that we're establishing. But it's often hard to see, or, also a hard thing to talk about, really. So I feel like building trust, I mean, the quick answer is you can't force someone to build awareness. If people are not ready for this, then it's probably not going to be super helpful. They might really need, there's this fine line between coaching and therapy, right? And they might really need therapy in order to work through certain things before they can really go to a state where they're more functional, and then they can move to optimal. So the way we learn about, what are the differences between coaching and therapy, and please correct me, if your view is different, but therapy is more going from a non-functional state to a functional, and then with coaching, you go from functional to optimal. And I think, again, and I'm repeating myself, but I feel like if you're not fully functional, then you can't just force these concepts onto someone. Or even if someone is functional, but they don't want to look at that. There might be a lot of rationalization rationalization. And as level 3 is really the hardest level to coach around, because people will always say, no, I'm fine, you know, it's good. I'm happy where I am, but you know, they're not. So trust building, relationships, trying to open folks up with questions that prompt them to go more inward. And this can be a process, you know, for some folks it takes really long, but others tap into it more quickly. But there's no like strategy, okay, this is how you will get this and this is how you shift your awareness right away. I wish there was, but it also makes it more exciting that there isn't such a thing, and it's a process to figure it out.
Good. I think I just saw Lisa. Martina, I love the thought of presenting as your authentic self. What is your advice when the authentic self goes against the cultural norms? I'm thinking of the intersection of leadership model with social constructs and inequities. I often find this is why people get stuck in a level 3, because they're internalizing those injustices.
Very good question. That's a complicated one. I think that would be a whole other discussion. What are some thoughts I could share here? I think it's also, again, you know, I think it's a balancing act, right? It's kind of figuring out how, I don't know if I have a good answer to this. What aspects of yourself can you be, or where can you be true to yourself, or how can you be true in your actions that are still within the cultural norm? It's I don't know if that answers the question at all. It's complex because ideally, you know, we shift everyone's awareness so there's no more judgment or very little judgment, and everybody can be their true self. I mean, I think we are on a way there where at least the topic of mindfulness and awareness find more of a landing place in corporate or in our society as a general. So I think we are kind of moving towards the right level, but it's definitely going to take a long, long time. I think maybe, you know, really modeling what that could look like to be your true authentic self. I would also think that some people might be surprised what a positive impact that would make. You know, people might, even those who are very firm in their type 2 or level 2 leadership style might, you know, say, oh, look at that, you know, that works too. It definitely takes courage. And, you know, I don't know enough about the situation to say, okay, go for it, or, you know, these are some steps to take.
Good. Yeah, I think it's a very, you know, Martina and I, we spoke yesterday and we were talking about the possibility of maybe having a workshop, or this really being, there's like so many levels of depth to this conversation that we could bring and explore. And maybe at some point that might be something that we can dive into a little bit more as well.
I think it would be fun, because I didn't really go much into what are advantages and disadvantages, you know, tell you guys really a little bit more. What are some maybe typical examples when someone operates from level 4 or 5? It was very high level, but I think there's so much content. I just want to, you know, give a brief overview and some takeaways, and hopefully it was helpful.
Yeah.
This was great, Martina. And I know several people had to get off. So I just wanted to convey their appreciation, because they were dropping thank yous and things like that.
Oh, thank you.
In the chat. Sorry, Simon, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Good. Yeah, I think we're at the end. We want to respect everyone's time as well. It's 4:30. Again, thank you, Martina, on behalf of everyone that was on the call. I think a very helpful conversation to to be ever engaged in, I feel like. And I think you had the slide up with your contact information. Do you mind just sharing really briefly, if someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can reach out on LinkedIn, just, search my name, Martina Felderman, or email is coaching@martinafelderman.com. And yeah, I'm happy to put it in the chat here too. Then people can just copy paste it. Alrighty, so that's my email. If anyone has questions, and yeah, let's just keep the conversation going. It would be fun to do a workshop. Maybe we can even meet in person one of these days, and let's see how things develop. But thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Simon and Sharon, for having me here. It was truly enjoyable.